If my voice were louder, if my body stronger, I would run through the streets, crying peace, peace, peace. Yada-da-da-da-da, 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 yada-da-da-da, yada-da-da-da-da, 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 If my voice were louder.
Gmar, Hatimah, Tovah, everyone, a good sealing to all, please God, in the book of life. It is wonderful to be together, those that are here in person and diving together, and all of you online as well. We send our love and joy to you. This is our favorite day of the year, starting last night. I know it can be a challenging day with the fast, but if we do this right, if our prayers go deeper and higher, then hopefully we will find a way to not only feel some pangs, it's true, but also be able to perhaps surpass them and channel them into our prayer and lift us even higher over the course of this incredibly powerful, meaningful, spiritually rich day in our tradition on Yom Kippur. So we're going to begin our davening on page 37 and invite all to rise together for the morning blessings of gratitude to the Holy One, Birchot HaShachar.
אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר נתן לשכל מבינה להבחין בין יום ובין לילה.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשני בצלמו.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשני ישראל.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם שעשני בן חורין.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם פוקח עברי.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם מלביש ערומים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, מתיר אסורים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, זוקף כפופים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, רוקה הארץ על המים.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, שעשה לי כל צורכי.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המכין מצעדי כבד.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוזר ישראל בגבורה.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, עוטר ישראל בתפארה.
אמן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, הנותן לאהב כוח.
אמן.
We remain standing, page 47, Baruch She'amar.
ברוך שאמר
והיה עולם ברוך הוא, ברוך עושה בראשים, ברוך מעושה בראשים, ברוך מלחמה לעם וסחתו בריאות.
יחיד כעולמים, מלך משובח, ומפורט יד שמו הגדול. ברוך אתה אדוני,
בשמו
מלך מהולל, ותשבחו.
Amen. You may be seated.
We continue with Psukei de Zimra, with verses of psalms and song to help us truly arrive in this moment. You know, it's one thing to arrive here in your seat or wherever you're sitting, to have turned on the YouTube in time. It's another thing to fully arrive in our bodies and our souls, and we need time to do that. So we begin with Psalm 27, which is on page 44. Page 44. And we sing the beautiful lines of Achat Sha'alti, just one thing I ask. And maybe there is one thing that you are asking for this Yom Kippur. Maybe there is just one thing you are praying that you can transform or grow or release during this day. This is a moment to begin nurturing that seed. Achat sha'ati me'ed Adonai, Achat sha'ati ota avakesh, Achat sha'ati me'ed Adonai, Achat sha'ati ota avakesh. Shivti, shivti, beved Adonai. Shivti, shivti, kol yemei hayai. Shivti, shivti, beved Adonai. Shivti, shivti, kol yemei hayai. Lachazor v'noam Adonai, ulageh v'halom. Lachazor v'noam Adonai, ulageh v'halom. We continue with Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha, page 60. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha. Ashrei Yoshvei Veitecha.
השם שנה לא אהבת להבין, ערמך למלך גדול, תעבדנו לכל החמה וכל מעשה, ולך נעשיך. מלכותך מלכות כל נמש. וכל השם.
ואנחנו נבריה מעתה ועד עולם. הללויה, הללויה. We continue now on page 65, continuing with these psalms, 7 lines down in the middle of the line. This beautiful phrase from the Song of the Sea, which we traditionally recite every morning, because we remember that there had to be so many things that went right for us to arrive in this moment, even just this morning, let alone this year. The words of this psalm are Ozi v'zimratia v'yehi li lishua. We're grateful that God has brought us to this moment, has given us strength, has been our song, so that we can begin this year anew. Ozi v'zimratia v'yehi li lishua. Deep breath, Nishmat as we prepare for Nishmat Kol Chai, the soul breath that it lives in each one of us is its own prayer, page 67. Nishmat Kol Chai Jimha Adonai Aleinu Rogo Basar Minu Namata El En la Melech Elata Vishanim Elchanim Ilafina Malashira Ibagisa Mimersi Hamim Ilav Yadayah V'Shamim Mitzangadan Lalina Achamecha Agivana Nelelecha Neshabechecha Unfahercha Unvarech et Shem Kodshecha Kamur LeDavid Baruch Nefesh Adonai V'chol Ravai et Shem Kodsho.
Page 69.
Ha'el v'tatzmot uzecha Hagadol b'chvod Shemecha
Hagibor lanetzach
Ve'hanora b'noratecha. כיסרה ונישא שוכנה מרום וקדוש שמו וכתוב עלינו צדיקים באדוני לישרים נאווה תהילה בפי ישרים תתרומם ובדברי צדיקים תתברך ובלשון חסידים תתקדש ובקרב קדושים תתעלה ובמקלות רבבות עמך בית ישראל להודות, להלל, לשבח, לפאר לרומם מהדר, לברך להקלס על כל דברי שירות ותשבחות דוד בן ישי
Please rise.
משיחה
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו מלך הגדול הקדוש בשמיים
ברכות והודעות מעתה ועד עולם ברוך אתה אדוני המלך גדול ותשבחות אל ההודעות אדוני נפלאות הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך העולמים.
Page 70, the bottom.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמר
אמן.
מה דברה חירותם ימליך מלכותם
מהיום ויומך
וחיי תכל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב אמרו
אמן. ישמר בברך לעולם המאה יתברך
וישתבח ויתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא
ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל
שמרי קודשה
בריחו
לילה לילה מכל ברכתה בשירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה דמירן בעלמה ואמרו
Amen. Page 71, a slight bow for the Baruch Hu.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך
Baruch Adonai המבורך לעולם ועד.
ברוך אדוני המבורך לעולם
May be
ועד.
seated.
ברוך אתה
אתה
אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם הפותח לנו שערי רחמים ומאיר עיני המחכים לסליחתו יוצר אור ובורא חושך עושה שלום ובורא את הכל אור עולם באוצר חיים אורות מאופל אמר
Continue now focusing on the blessing of creation, starting on page 72 and then turning immediately to page 75 after, focusing on creation. Five lines to the top of 75.
כולם אהובים, כולם ברורים, כולם גיבורים, וכולם עושים ברע וביראה רצון קונם, וכולם פותחים מפיהם בקדושה ותורה, בשירה וזמרה, ומברכים ומשבחים, ופרים ומקדישים ומגליכים
את שם האל המלך הגדול, הגיבור והנורא הקדוש הוא.
וכולם מקבלים עליהם עול מלכות שמיים זה מזה, ונותנים רשות זה לזה, להקדיש ליוצרם בנחת רוח, בשפה ברורה בנימה קדושה, כולם כחרונים ואומרים ביראה
קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך הארץ כבודו.
לאופנים וחיות הקודש, ורעש גדול, מנסים לעומת צרפים, לעומתם משבחים, ואומרים ברוך כבוד אדוני, מקומו
ליל ברוך, נימות אלך וקיים, חדשות בן לחמות,
רפואות,
נראתי לנו נפלאות, המחדש ומנסה ראשים.
אור חדש על ציון תאיר, ונזכה כולנו מראה לאורו, ברוך אתה אדוני,
השמו
יוצר המאורות.
Amen. So, Chevre, page 76. For those wearing a talit, we grab the four corners of our talit together, tzitziot, guiding them as one as we focus on the oneness of God. So first, the prayer of love, of God's love on page 76, leading into the Shema Yisrael. And this is the one time of year, as we mentioned last night, on one day of the year, not only Shema Yisrael out loud, we cover our eyes and chant Shema Yisrael, declaring God's oneness, but also Baruch Shem Kovod, the second line after. So begin page 76 into Shema Yisrael.
קרבתנו לשמך הקדוש אל באמת, להודות לך ויחדך באהבה, ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בעמו ישראל באהבה.
Amen.
Shema
Israel, Adonai, Eloheinu, Adonai, Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto Le'olam Va'ed. אהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך וקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וקטעתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך. Continue quietly to the middle of 78. והם שמות ישמות השלוחים, מצוותכם. Amen. The top of page 80, we continue.
תהילות לאל עליון ברכו ובברך משה ומרים ובני ישראל לך אנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך בנים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות אוסף שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים לשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד צור ישראל קומה בעזרת ישראל ופתחנו מרע יהודה וישראל גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו קדוש ישראל ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
Amen. So, Sheberach, of course, we're standing and placing our feet together, facing the ark towards Yerushalayim, towards Jerusalem. We now turn in our machzorim to Yom Kippur Amidah of the morning on page 252. 252. We're going to begin the Amidah together from 252 through about page 257. I'll guide you through it. The first few blessings of the Amidah will daven together as a congregation, and the rest will be silent until page 270. Remember, there's a lot of prayers in there. There's the beating of our chest or the tapping on our heart, as Rabbi Jenny taught. So there's opportunities here to reflect on our sins, reflect on our year, to think about who we need to forgive and who do we need to ask forgiveness of. Even on this Yom Kippur, we could still ask or commit ourselves tomorrow to ask, still in this time, when the gates are still open. Who do we need to think about? And look back on our year and what ways and who we holding, who we remembering, who we holding in our heart who's no longer with us, who we hold with us on this Yom Kippur. So don't be limited by the machzor in the prayer book. Add in your own prayers. Add in your own mistakes, your own struggles. That's what makes prayer compelling and personal to you, between your relationship and God. So begin pages 252 to 257. We'll daven together. And the traditional prayers to 270 are done silently.
Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu Imotenu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, טובים וקונה הכל וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות ומביא גואל לבני בניהם למען שמו ויאהבה מסוד חכמים ונבונים ומלמד דעת מבינים הבטחה פי בתפילה ובתחנונים לחלות ולחנן פני מלך מלא רחמים מוכר וסולח לעוונים
זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, זוכרנו לחיים, מלך חפץ בחיים, ועודנו בספר החיים, למענך אלוהים חיים.
מלך עוזר ופוקר מושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני,
ברוך שמו,
מגן אברהם ופוקר צרה.
אמן.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים מתים, אתה רב להושיע,
להקל חיים וחסד, לחיים מתים, רחמים רבים, סומך נפלי, ערוב וחולי, ומתיר אסורים, ומקיים אמונתו, משני עפר. מי כמוך בעל גבורות ומיתו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה מצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך עבר רחמים זוכר צוריו, לחיים ורחמים, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני, ברוך שמו,
מחיי המתים.
Amen. Continue on page 257 with the Kedusha.
אתה אלוהינו מלך מוחל וסולח, נריצך ונקדישך, כזאת שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש, ככתוב על יד נביאך וכרסל זה ואמר
קדוש, 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 אדוני זו מלוך הארץ כבודו.
כבודו מלא עולם ושרתיו שואלים זה לזה, היה מקום כבודו לעומתם ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו יפן ברחמים ויחונם במייחדים שמו ערב הבוקר בכל יום תאמין פעמיים מאהבה שמה אומרים
שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד.
הוא אלוהינו אבינו מלכנו ומושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים
אני אדוני אלוהיכם.
אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ והיה אדוני למלך כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמוך אחד ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור
אם לא ונעלה לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור הללויה.
לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ונצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושפחך אלוהינו פינו לימוש לעולם ועד כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני
ברוך שמו
המלך הקדוש.
Continue with silent prayer, the 270.
Shalom Aleinu.
We turn now to page 262 in Ramach Stream. If you're still davening, please continue to do so. Your Amidah. Hear our voice, Adonai our God. Be kind and have compassion for us. Willingly and lovingly accept our prayer. Turn us toward you, Adonai, and we will return to you. Make our days seem fresh as they once were. Shema Kol Chai.
Shema Kol Aleinu. Adonai Eloheinu, Huz verachem aleinu, vekabel berachamim uvratzon et tfilateinu, hashivenu Adonai elecha v'nashuvah, Kaddish, Kaddish yameinu kekedem.
Continue on page 263. I invite you to read together with me on the top of 263. Our God and God of our ancestors, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. For we are your people, and you are our God. We are your children, and you are our parent. We are your servants, and you are our master. We are your congregation, and you are our portion. We are your heritage, and you are our destiny. We are your flock, and you are our shepherd.
We
are your vineyard, and you are our guardian. We are your creatures, and you are our creator. We are your spouse, and you are our beloved. We are your cherished ones, and you are near to us. We are your people, and you are our sovereign. We are the ones you address, and you are the one to whom we speak.
Ki
rise together on page 264 for the Ashamnu. Let's begin first in English on the left-hand page. We place our hand over our chest, either a closed or, as Rabbi Jenny noted, an open hand, more of a soft touch. We abuse, we betray, we are cruel, we destroy, we embitter, we falsify, we gossip, we hate, we insult, we jeer, we kill, we lie, we mock, we neglect, we oppress, we pervert, we quarrel, we rebel, we steal, we transgress, we are unkind, we are violent, we are wicked, we are extremists, we yearn to do evil, we are zealous for bad causes. Ashamnu v'agadnu, razalnu, dibarnu, dovi, evinu, ve'irshanu, zadnu, chamasnu, tafanu, sheker, yatznu ra, kizavnu, Latznu, maradnu, niyatznu, sararnu, avinu, pashanu, tsararnu, kishinu, oreb, prashanu, shichatnu, tiadnu, ta'inu, tidanu. Continue on page 266 with the Al-Chet. As we did last night, we'll begin with Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, and then there's the last few words of the English line on the left of 266. We'll also do it responsively. I will lead the bold, and Rabbi Jenny with everyone in the congregation in the italics. It goes like this. Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, willingly and unwillingly.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through hardening our hearts.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, thoughtlessly.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, in idle chatter.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through sexual immorality.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, openly and in private.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, knowingly and deceitfully.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, by the way we talk.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by defrauding others.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, in our innermost thoughts.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through forbidden trysts.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through empty confession.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by scorning parents and teachers.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, purposely and by mistake.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by resorting to violence.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, by public desecration of your name.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through foul speech.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through foolish talk.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, pursuing the impulse to evil.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, wittingly and unwittingly.
Together,
For all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
Al kulam Elohaz Aliyah, Zalach lanu, Ve'al lanu, Kavel lanu. Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through denial and deceit.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, by taking bribes.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by clever cynicism.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, by speaking ill of others.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by the way we do business.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, in our eating and drinking.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by greed and oppressive interest.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through arrogance.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, in everyday conversation.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through conspiratorial glances.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through condescension.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through stubbornness.
Together, for all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement.
Ve'al
Kulam Elohaz Aliyah, Zalach lanu, Ve'al lanu, Kavel lanu. Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by throwing off all restraint.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, by rashly judging others.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by plotting against others.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through selfishness.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through superficiality.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through stubbornness.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by rushing to do evil.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through gossip.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, through empty promises.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, through baseless hatred.
Al-Chet Shechatanu Lefanecha, by betraying trust.
V'al-chet shechatanu lefanecha, by succumbing to confusion.
Together, for all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us,
pardon us, grant us atonement.
Al
Ve'al
Elohaz Aliyah, Zalach lanu, standing now as the ark is open. Turn to page 271 in our Machzorim for Avinu Malkeinu. Ay, 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 ay. Avinu Malkeinu, we have sinned in your presence.
Avinu Malkeinu, we have no sovereign but you.
Avinu Malkeinu, act toward us kindly in accord with your name.
Avinu Malkeinu, make this a good new year for us.
Avinu Malkeinu, annul every harsh decree against us.
Avinu Malkeinu, nullify the designs of our foes.
Avinu Malkeinu, frustrate the plots of our enemies.
Avinu Malkeinu, rid us of every oppressor and adversary.
Avinu Malkeinu, rid your covenanted people of disease, war, hunger, captivity, and destruction.
Avinu Malkeinu, forgive and pardon all our sins.
Avinu Malkeinu, do not look toward our sins and transgressions, blot them out.
Avinu Malkeinu, return us to your presence fully penitent.
Avinu Malkeinu, send complete healing to the sick among your people.
Avinu Malkeinu, remember us favorably.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us for good in the book of life.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of redemption.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of sustenance.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of merit.
Avinu Malkeinu, inscribe us in the book of forgiveness. Avinu Malkeinu, cause our salvation to flourish soon.
Avinu Malkeinu, cause your people Israel to be exalted.
Avinu Malkeinu, raise up your anointed with strength.
Avinu Malkeinu, hear our voice, be kind, sympathize with us.
Avinu Malkeinu, accept our prayer willingly and lovingly.
Avinu Malkeinu, do not turn us away empty-handed.
Avinu Malkeinu, remember that we are but dust.
Avinu Malkeinu, have compassion for us, our infants and our children.
Avinu Malkeinu, do this for the sake of those who are martyred for your holy name.
Avinu Malkeinu, do this for the sake of those who were slaughtered for their exclusive devotion to you.
Avinu Malkeinu, do this for the sake of those who went through fire and water to sanctify your holy name.
Avinu Malkeinu, do this for your sake, if not for ours.
Avinu Malkeinu, have mercy on us, answer us, for our deeds are insufficient. Deal with us charitably and lovingly, and redeem us.
Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vaneinu, Yevanu Mazin, Azeh Imanu, Zedaka B'chesed, Azeh Imanu, Zedaka B'chesed, Ve'oshienu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Avinu Malkeinu, Chonenu Vaneinu, Ki Emanu Masim, Azeh Imanu, Zedaka B'chesed, Azeh Imanu, Tzedaka B'chesed, Ve'oshienu.
You may be seated, everyone. Kaddish Shalem 272.
Yitkata
Ve'ikadash Shem Ve'rabah Ve'alma Divra Iroteh Ve'amlech Yitbarah ve'ishtabah, Yitbarah v'ri'u le'ela le'ela mikol shirata v'shirata tishbechata v'nechemata ne'amiran bi'alma v'imru amen titkaber tzeloto novoto ne'ho Yisrael kadam avuho nivishmaya ve'imeru amen shalom alava mishamaya
וחיים עלינו
Yach Yisrael ya 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 Imru amen Ose shalom bimromav hu yaseh
שלום עלינו
Ya 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 ya
ועל כל ישראל ואמרו
Amen. Tov, Chevra, we turn to page 274 in our Machzorim. We're entering the Torah service. We begin with Ein Kamocha.
אין כמוך אלוהים אדוני
ואין
כמעשיך מלכותך מלכות כל העולמים וממשלתך בכל דור ודור
אדוני מלך, אדוני מלך, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד, אדוני עוז ומורידן, פרד עמו בשלום, העמים נטיבה ורצונך, את ציון תבנה חומות ירושלים, כי עירך לבד בטחנו. Please rise.
ונישא אדון עולמים ויהי בנשא אהרון ויאמר משה
קומה אדוני יעבודו אליך וינוסו משנאיך מפניך כי מציון תצא תורה כי מציון תצא תורה ודבר אדוני בירושלים ברוך שנתן תורה תורה ברוך שנתן תורה טהורה לעמו ישראל וקדושתו. 275. אדוני אדוני אל רחום וחנון אל אפיים ורב חסד ואמת נוצר חסד לאלפים נוזר עוון ופשע ורדף ונקה אדוני אדוני אל רחום וחנון אל אפיים ורב חסד ואמת נוצר חסד לאלפים נוזר עוון ופשע ורדף ונקה אדוני אדוני אל רחום וחנון אל אפיים ורב חסד ואמת נוצר חסד לאלפים נושא עוון ופשע ורדף ונקה. Page 276, Rabbi Jen leads us responsively in Shema Yisrael.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh B'Torah Shema.
Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh. Turn around, guys. Shema. Slight.
Gadol Adonai iti,
Oneromema Shema Yachdav. Lecha Adonai Hagedula Hagevura Hatiferet Ve'adneta Ve'ahod Kicho Bashamayim U'ba'aretz Kicho Bashamayim U'ba'aretz Lecha Adonai Hamamlacha Yamik Naseh Lechol Erod
Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu l'adam raklam.
Kadoshu
Ramemu Adonai Eloheinu v'ishtachavu l'har kodsho.
Ki Gadol Adonai Eloheinu. You may be seated, everyone. Gmar Tov.
So in just a moment, we will delve into a somewhat obscure Torah portion describing how the Yom Kippur rituals were observed by our people in ancient times. And these rituals included, of course, the high priests, aromatic incense, sacrificial animals, and scapegoats. And our rituals today are much less dramatic, but no less meaningful. One of the words that you're going to hear repeatedly in this Torah portion is the word kapara, kapara. And this word, of course, is connected to Kippur, as in Yom Kippur. Yet the translation of kapara, or Kippur, isn't so obvious. So usually we translate Kippur, or kapara, as atonement. But we don't really know what that means. Technically, kapara means to cover over, to cover over. And I think that the idea here, if we think about what it means to cover over, is very powerful. Because atonement doesn't erase our sins. It can't. Our sins will always be there, along with everything else and everyone else has ever done. But when we make atonement, kapara, we are covering over our wrongdoing with the will to behave differently. And so this doesn't erase our prior behavior, but it may, in fact, redeem it. Even more, it will allow us to move on and let go of our past. Our behavior is still out there, and it always will be, but we're no longer attached to it in the same way. We no longer need to feel guilty about it. We no longer need to feel that we failed. We no longer need to claim ownership over it. We no longer need to stare at it all the time. We have covered it over with a new commitment to move through the world differently, creating a new story about ourselves. Like you, I try to be a good person, a good wife and mother, a good daughter, a good friend, a good citizen, a good rabbi. But I'm human, and I inevitably let people down. I fail all the time. Just ask my family. I let myself down, for God's sake. But the notion of kapara, of covering over, insists that the hurt that I've caused, despite my best intentions and efforts, can be covered over. Again, not erased or forgotten, but covered up like a bandage on a wound, so that it can be acknowledged and tended and over time even healed. That as we go forward, we have the power to cover over the hurt we have caused with new acts of will that show we are growing and we can do better. We all can. So you can follow along with this Torah reading on page 278.
So, page 278 in your Machzorim. Our first Torah reader is Steve Katz. We're honored to come forward. We this time invite Philip and Sue Ellen to come forward for the first Aliyah to the Torah. ויעזור ויגעים ושישים בו ונאמר אמן הכל הבו גודל לאלוהינו כבוד לתורה יעמדו פנחס שלמה בן אברהם הכהן ושר דבורה ושרה בת אפרים הלוי ופגה על העלייה הראשונה ברוך שנתן תולמו יסביל שעתו ואתם מביאים אדוני אלוהיכם היום
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Atah Adonai Hamavorah Voed. Baruch Atah Adonai Hamavorah Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bahar Banu Mechol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu Torah Baruch Atah Adonai Notain HaTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayedaber Adonai el Moshe Acharei Mot Shnei b'nei Aharon B'karvatam lifnei Adonai Vayamutu Vayomer Adonai el Moshe Daber el Aharon Ahicha V'al yavo b'chol et el hakodesh mi beit laparochet el pnei hakaporet asher al ha'aron v'lo yamut ki be'anan era'eh al hakaporet bazot yavo aharon el hakodesh b'far ben bakar L'chatat va'ayil la'olah Katonet bad kodesh yilbash U'michnasei vad Yihayu al bisaro Uva'avnet bad yachgor Uvmitznefet bad yitznof Big day kodesh heim virachat b'mayim Et bisaro u'lavesham Umeit adat b'nei Yisrael yikach shnei se'iri izim lechatat va'ayil echat la'olah v'hikriv Aharon et par hachatat asher lo v'chiper ba'ado uva'ad beito.
Shikoyach, Steve. Kol hakavod.
Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Olam Asher Natan Lanu Torah Emet V'hai Olam Nata B'Toheinu Baruch Atah Adonai Notain HaTorah.
Amen.
So, our second Aliyah, we are reading on the top of page 279. We invite Mandy and Sam Cohen to come forward for the second Aliyah. Yamdu Micha bat Moshe v'Sisel, v'Yisrael Ezekiel ben Yosef v'Yosefa. L'Aliyah Shenit, top of 279.
Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavorah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Leolam Va'ed. Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. V'lakach et shnei ha'sa'urim, v'he'emid otam lifnei Adonai, petach ohel moed. V'natan Aharon al shnei ha'sa'urim, gorah echad l'Adonai, v'gorah echad la'azazel. V'hikriv Aharon et hasa'ir asher ala alav hagorah l'Adonai v'yasahu chatat. V'hasa'ir asher ala alav hagorah la'azazel ya'omad chai lifnei Adonai l'chaper alav lishalach oto la'azazel hamidbara v'hikriv Aharon et par hachatat asher lo v'chiper ba'ado uva'ad beito v'shachat et par hachatat asher lo.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah emet, v'hayeh olam natan b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen.
It's fine, no problem. So, we turn out to our third Aliyah. We invite now for the Daniel Sadisky Memorial Aliyah. We are so honored to invite Beth Rossen to come forward. Tamod le'abat Avron Devora l'Aliyah Shlishit. This 30 Aliyah is at bottom 279. This is honored award in honor of Dan Satisky, Alava Shalom, one of the greatest leaders in our congregation's history, with a tremendous commitment, he and his wife Alice, may she rest in peace, to children and support of children in Jewish education. We are so grateful to give this honor to Beth, who has been so committed for so many years, not only to her own family, but to all the children in our congregation. We are so grateful.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamvorach.
Baruch Adonai Barak Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvorach le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai el. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. B'lakach melamakta, kachaleyesh, me'al mizbeach, milifnei Adonai, u'meloch efnav, k'toret samim daka, be'hevi mibeit laparochet, v'natan et haketoret al ha'esh lifnei Adonai, v'chisa anan haketoret et hakaporet asher al ha'edut v'lo yamut, v'lakach midam hapar midam hapar v'hizav yatzbo al pnei hakaporet kedma b'lifnei hakaporet yazeh sheva piyamim min hadam b'etzba'o v'shachat et sir hachatat asher lam v'hevi et damo el mibeit laparochet v'yasa et damo kasher asa l'dam hapar v'hizato al hakaporet v'lifnei hakaporet v'chiper al hakodesh mitumahu b'nei Yisrael u'mipisheihem l'chol chatotam v'chein yaseh li'ohel moed ashochein itam b'tov tumatam v'chol adam lo yiyeh b'ohel moed b'lo l'chaper b'kodesh ad seitov v'chiper b'do u'v'yad beito u'v'yad kol kehal Yisrael.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Shekah. Kol hakavod, Beth. You can go to the side across that down. It makes you uncomfortable. So, we now turn to our fourth Aliyah. We are now continuing to be on page 280 at this time. And this is a very special Aliyah. We're starting a new tradition. We are inviting all our religious school educators and teachers and leadership to come up for one Aliyah together. We could not be more honored. In fact, I'm going to invite, as they walk up, if everyone will please rise for a moment, everyone honor as our educators come forward. Yamdu ha-chani, can we say the ones who teach our children, Amilamdim, Amilamdod, Kol hayeladim shalanu, L'Aliyah Revi'it. We're so honored to have these teachers who guide our children beautifully, some for generations, literally. We're so honored to have them here, including our former amazing director, Amy, who still is at Pitches In, and of course, Kathy, our chief of the religious school community. Everyone may be seated this time. We now invite our Olot and Olim to come a little closer. We want to do it together. Ashley, come on. There we go. I can do it like this. This is the group Aliyah way. Are we ready? Oh, okay, well, one symbolic tzitzit, okay? All right, ready? Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch Adonai Barach Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen.
Amen. V'yatzal hamizbeach asher lifnei Adonai v'chiper alav v'lakach midam apar u'midam hasair v'natan al karnot hamizbeach savid v'hizah alav minadam v'yatzba'o sheva pamim v'tiharo v'kicho mitumo b'nei Yisrael v'chila mikaperet hakodesh v'yatohel moed v'yat hamizbeach v'higri v'asahir Sa'ir hechai v'samach Aharon et she'adav al rosh ha'so'ir hachai v'vadalav et kol anot b'nei Yisrael v'et kol pisheihem l'chol chatatam v'natanotam al rosh Hasair v'shilach biadish iti hamibara v'nasa hasair alav ekol donatam el eretz gezerah v'shilach et hasair b'mibar Uvahavron Elohamoed Ufashat Bigdei Abad Asher Lavash Bivola Kodesh Binicham Sham Berachat Zebisarov Amayim Bimakom Kadosh Bilavash Epigadah Viatsa Erolatu Viatolahatam Vichiper Ba'ado
Shkochech. Beautiful job. Beautiful job. Okay,
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam natan b'tocheinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shekok told our teachers we cannot thank you enough. Shekok for your beautiful work. You literally are raising our congregation. We are so grateful. You're invited to come at the side, or symbolic, maybe one of you can represent. Maybe Amy will represent, or somebody. Okay. Y'all get your shekoks. Beautiful job.
Yeah, you can.
So we're so honored.
You can sit down.
Now
Yeah,
for
you
our
can sit
fifth
down.
Aliyah.
It's nice to
So
have,
I want to
one
remind
person.
everyone,
Kim will
this
stay
is
for
obviously it's Yom Kippur. This is a 1,000-year-old tradition, but it's a unique time given the pandemic. So for this fifth Aliyah, we had given out this Aliyah to a particular honoree, but his honoree was unable to accept the honor due to the situation. So we, in discussion with that person and that couple, they had recommended what we'd like to offer as well. So when I offer this Aliyah forward, it's going to require some people here, we hope, who are willing to come up and take this Aliyah under the following theme, which I'll explain in a second. And I know you might be a little embarrassed. You say, it's got Yom Kippur, and I'm going to do this. It's on TV, Gavalt. But remember, it's not for you. It's for the Torah. Okay, you are blessing the Torah, but it does give us a chance to thank you for your service. And what is that theme? We would like to give an opportunity to thank and honor and give you the honor of blessing the Torah, all those who have been on what we consider the front lines of the pandemic. That would be all people, and I mean in the widest sense, particularly people that might be a bit invisible to the larger world, not just those who are obviously seen, but those that are involved in supporting and helping those people that are struggling in the pandemic. Of course, that would mean people in the medical community, nurses, physicians, those in hospital administration, those who are therapists, people who are involved in emergency services, law enforcement, obviously in the apparatus of government who are helping to make this happen. If you would identify yourself, even if you'd say, well, I'm just a minor part, it's okay, it's okay. We would like to give you the opportunity as a way for our community to say thank you to all those who have been doing service to truly help those in need during this very difficult time. This was the request of us. It's also the request of the couple that was unable to take the Aliyah. And we're hoping that some people this time, while Jenny sings a nigun, will self-identify and come forward and don't be embarrassed. We want to thank you for your service. Educators, teachers, especially in public schools. Jeff Engel, come on, Joe, come on, man. Invite all to rise again. As they group together, but don't group together. Okay, keep on going down. Let's just go a little farther down, a little farther down. See, they know too well not to group together. This is the problem. All right. Just to group a little bit more. Shrink, we come just a little bit down. Exactly. Come on down. All right. So we want to, yes.
Just hold it high.
Yeah, I'll hold it up. Okay, Doug. We want to thank you for self-identifying yourselves. We know it's not your typical way. You're modest by nature, but we are grateful to you for doing your service. Okay, in honor of all those who've helped serve in the pandemic, together. Baruch hu et Adonai hamba, Baruch Adonai barach leolam va'ed, Baruch Adonai barach leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher bachar banu mikol hamim, ונתן לנו את תורתו, Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. You may be seated. We'll invite one person. We share. Barbara, come. Yeah, Barbara, there you go. There we go. We just to hold this one. There we go. Very perfect.
Amen. B'yei chelev ha'chatat yaktir habizbecha v'hamsham le'achar ha'sa'ir lazazel yechabeis begadav v'rachat b'sarehu b'mayim v'yacharechen yavo el ha'machaneh v'yei par ha'chatat v'yei sir ha'chatat asher uvat amam lechaper b'kodesh yotzi el michutz ha'machaneh v'sarfu v'yisher oratam yeb'saram v'yed pirsham Pasorei fotam yechabeis begadav v'rachat b'saro b'mayim v'yacharechen yavo ha'machaneh v'hayta lachem lechukat olam b'chodesh hashvi'i b'asur lachodesh Te'anu nafshetechem v'chol melacha lo tasu ha'ezrach v'hagar b'tochechem ki vayom hazeh yechaper lechem l'taherechem mikol chatotechem Lifnei Adonai Titaru.
Shekoach, Linda, beautiful job. Okay, thank you, Barbara. Will represent. Shekoach, beautiful. All right. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah. Amen. Shekoach. Everyone, we thank you so much for coming forward at this time. You can go back to your seats this time. It's okay. We won't make you group unnecessarily. Don't worry. All right. Shekoach, everyone. Kol hakavod. We thank you for your service deeply on our holiest day of the year. So, we now turn to our sixth Aliyah. We call forward for the Abe Kenaf Memorial Aliyah. May he rest in peace. We call forward Susan Bach at this time. Ta'amod Sarzi Shabbat Yosef Esther L'Aliyah Shishit. And this honor is given to a person in our community who is dedicated to lifelong learning, to Torah study, to growing in Torah study, and providing that Torah study for others as well. And Susan, many of you already know Susan and her family are very involved in the congregation in multiple ways, including multiple generations. And Susan also spoke beautifully last year as our Shoah speaker about her family, and that itself was an education to our community as well. We're grateful for your service to our congregation too. Susan, Bakasha.
Baruch atah Adonai. Oh, sorry. Baruch hu et Adonai hamvarah.
Baruch Adonai Barach le'olam va'ed.
Baruch Adonai hamvarah le'olam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bahar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai Notain haTorah.
Amen. Look who's reading here. This is awesome.
Amen. Shabbat Shabbaton hi lachem ve'initem et nafshotechem chukat olam ve'chiper hakohen asher yimshachoto va'asher yimoleh et yado lechachen tachat avi ve'lavash et bidei habad bidei hakodesh ve'chiper et mikdash hakodesh ואת אוהל מועד, בין המזבח יכפר, ועל הכהנים ועל כל עם הקהל יכפר. והייתה זאת לכם לחוקת עולם, לכפר על בני ישראל מכל חטאותם אחד בשנה. ויעש כאשר ציווה אדוני את משה.
Sheberach, listen. It's great to have you back. Okay.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah.
Amen. Sheberach. Very beautifully done. We now rise together as Rabbi Jenny is going to lead us in a special prayer for healing. Obviously, this prayer for healing in this time of Yom Kippur in the pandemic, we obviously pray for all those who are suffering from COVID-19 specifically. But all those who are suffering really is, which includes all of us, from what the ramifications of COVID-19, the part that really weighs on our soul, the concern, the fear, the anxiety, the isolation, it's challenging. Then we have people in our community who sadly are suffering from illnesses and struggles, those with cancer, various ailments. We're holding them deeply in our prayers on this Yom Kippur. So I invite you all to take a moment to hold in your hearts and reflect on those who are holding in your heart who are in need of healing. And then after a moment of silence and quiet time, reflect on those names. Rabbi Jenny will lead us in the Sheberach.
Sheberach Avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov ve'imotenu Sarah Rivka Rachel v'Leah hu yivarech et kol hacholim ve'yasir mehem kol machala v'yirpa lechol gufam v'yislach lechol avonam וישלח ברכה והצלחה בכל מעשה ידיהם עם כל ישראל אחיהם ואחותיהם ונאמר אמן.
May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, bless them all who are ill and remove from them any sickness. Heal their bodies, forgive their transgressions, send blessing and good fortune to all the work of their hands, as well as to all their brothers and sisters, the people of Israel. And let us say together, Amen. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shmei rabbah v'yamad yivrach chiruteh v'amlich malchuteh v'hayehanu v'yom echad u'chayecha beit Yisrael v'gala v'gala u'bizman kariv imeru. Amen. Yesh merabah mevorah le'olam ha'me'amayam Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadah v'yitaleh v'yitalal Shmei Kedusha leila min kol berchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran b'yamam v'meru. Amen. We now call to lift and address the first Sefer Torah. We call Steve Katz this time. Ya'amod Yisrael ben Hila v'shul Rivka Magbia Sefer Rishon and Jody to trust the Torah. Ta'amod Yudit bat Avram v'Sara golelet Sefer Rishon Ve'zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei Bnei Yisrael Api Adonai Ve'yad Moshe. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, 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 ay. Ay, ay. See the Sandy, please? Okay. Beautiful. The Torah is placed down into Sandy's arms. You may be seated, everyone. We continue now with the second Sefer Torah for the Maftir Aliyah. It's on page 282. And we call Rabbi Jenny for Fil Nachon. Is that right? Tamod Rav Yochav Rachel bat Mordechai v'Chaya Bela lamaftira.
Baruch hu et Adonai hamavorach.
Baruch Adonai Barach leolam vaed.
Baruch Adonai hamavorach leolam vaed. Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam. Asher bachar banu mikol hamim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vasu lachodesh hashvi hazeh mikra kodesh yeh elachem nitem et nafshotechem kol melacha lo ta'asu. V'hikraftem olah la'adonai re'ach nihoach par b'makar echad yil echad kivazim b'nei la'shivatem min yeyulachem Umin hatam solet bilulav shamen shilosha esronim lavar shenlehi esronim la'ayil ha'echad Yisavrohun lakeves ha'echad leshivat ha'kivasim Seir izim echad chatat milvad chatat hakipurim rolah tamid umin chatat v'nizkehem.
Baruch ata Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch ata Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Shekoyach. We now rise again to lift the second Sefer Torah at this time. We call forward Jeff to lift the Torah and Michelle and Mark to dress the Torah. Yamod Yoshua ben Binyamin Magbias Sefer Shini Yamdu Machlabat Avram Yehudit v'Chaim ben Peretz v'et Golelo Golim Sefer Shini v'zot HaTorah Asher Sam Moshe Livnei Yisrael Api Adonai v'Yad Moshe Be seated, everyone. We continue now with Shekoyach. We continue now with the Haftarah. We're offering an introduction into it as well.
So one of my most important teachers that I've shared with many of you, especially about the spiritual meaning of the days of awe, is Rabbi Alan Lew, L-E-W. of blessed memory. Rabbi Lou had an amazing perspective on this morning's Haftarah from the book of Isaiah, which speaks of a movement from darkness to light. And here's how he understands it. Basically, Isaiah is laughing at us. So let me explain. Here we are. Most of us have fasted from dinner last night, and we're feeling pretty proud of ourselves. We're wishing ourselves a little mazel tov with each hunger pang. And then in this Haftarah, we hear God's voice, and instead of God congratulating us on our fast so far, if we listen closely, we actually hear God mocking us. Is this the fast I have chosen? Is this your affliction of the soul? Is it to drop your head like a bulrush, to grovel in sackcloth and ashes? Is this what you call fasting? A fast that the Lord would accept? Is not this my chosen fast? Loosen all the bonds that bind humans unfairly. Let the oppressed go free. Break every yoke. Share your bread with the hungry. Take the homeless into your home. Clothe the naked when you see him, and do not turn away from people in need. Then cleansing light shall break forth like the dawn, and your wounds shall soon be healed. Isaiah is telling us how we turn away from darkness and towards the light. Fasting alone doesn't help us see the light. We find light when instead of turning away from those who are in need, we turn towards them. Lou writes, the way of Yom Kippur is to realize, like Isaiah, that we are all part of a whole, and that we move toward the light of God when we care for each other, when we realize in our flesh and bones that our own happiness depends on the happiness of everyone else in the world. When we are hungry, we eat, and when we are tired, we sleep. When someone else is hungry, we feed them. When someone else is homeless, we find shelter for them. If we try to ignore them, we only darken our own world. So yes, I think we can all quell just a little bit. We can be a little proud that we have fasted and survived services so far, but don't stop there. Our goal is to turn towards the light, and that means seeing those among us who are most vulnerable in whatever form and turning towards them. That is what I believe God is truly asking us in the year to come. So our Haftarah can be found on page 284. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar b'nviim tovim vatzav divreihem hanemarim be'emet. Baruch atah Adonai habocher b'torah Moshe avdo u'Yisrael amo u'b'nviei ha'emet v'tzedek. ואמר סולו סולו פנו דרך הרימו מכשול מדרך עמי כי כה אמר רם ונישא שוכנת וקדוש שמו מרום וקדוש אשכון ותקר שפע רוח לחיות רוח שפלים ולחיות לב נתקעים כי לא לעולם אריב ולא לנצח אקצוף כי רוח מלפניי הטוב ונשמות אני עשיתי מבון ביצו קצפתי והכהו הסתר וקצוף וילך שובב בדרך ליבו דרכיו ראיתי וארפאהו ואנחהו ושלם ניחומים לו ולאבליו מורני בשפתיים שלום שלום לרחוק ולקרוב אמר אדוני ורפתיו ורשעים קיים מגרש כי השקט לא יוכל ויגרשו מימיו רפש ותית אין שלום אמר אלוהי לרשעים קרב הגרון אל תחסוך כשופר הרם קולך והגן לה מפשעם, ולבית יעקב חטאותם. ואותי יום יום ידרושון, ודת רחה יחפצון, כגוי אשר צדקה עשה, ומשפט אלוהיו לא עזב. ישאלוני משפטי צדק, קרבת אלוהים יחפצון. למה צמנו ולא ראית, עינינו נפשנו ולא תדע. הן מיום צומכם תמצאו חפץ, וכל עטביכם תנגושו. הן לריב ומצה תצומו, ולהכות בגרוף רשע. לא תצומו כיום, להשמיע במרום קולכם. החזה יהיה צום אבחרהו, יום ענות אדם נפשו. על החוף כגמון ראשו, ושק ואפר יציע, על הזה תקרא צום, ויום רצון לאדוני. הלא זה צום אבחרהו, פתח חרצובות רשע, התר אגודות מותה, ושלח רצוצים חופשים, וכל מותה תנתקו. הלא פרוס לרעב לחמך, וניים רודים תביא בית, כי תראה ערוב וכיסיתו, ומבשרך לא תתעלם. אז יבקע כשחר אורך, וארוחתך מרה תצמח, והלך לפניך צדקך, כבוד אדוני יאספך. אז תקרב אדוני ענה תשבע, ויאמר הנני, אם תסיר מתוכך מותה, שלח אצבע ודבק אבן, ותפק לרעב נפשך, ונפש נענן תשביע, וזרח בחושך אורך, ואפלתך כצהריים. ונכח אדוני תמיד, והשביע בצחצחות נפשך, ועצמותיך יחליט, והיית כגר רבה, וכמוצא המים, אשר לא יחזבו מימיו. ובאנו ממך חורבות עולם, מוסדי דור ודור תקומם, וקורא לך גודר פרץ, ושובב נתיבות לשבת. אם תשיב משבת רגליך, עשות חפצך ביום קודשי, וקראת לשבת עונג, לקדוש אדוני מכובד, וכיבדתו מעשות דרכיך, ממצוא חפצך ודבר דבר. אז תתענג על אדוני, והרכבתיך על במותי הארץ, והאכלתיך נחלת יעקב אביך, כי בי אדוני דיבר. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, צור כל עולמים, צדיק בכל הדורות, האל הנאמן האומר ועושה, המדבר ומקיים, שכל דבריו אמת וצדק. נאמן אתה הוא אדוני אלוהינו, ונאמנים דבריך, ודבר אחד מדבריך יכול לא ישוב ריקם. כי אל מלך נאמן ורחמן אתה, ברוך אתה אדוני האל הנאמן בכל דברך ודבריו. רחם על ציון כי היא בית חיינו, ולעלובת נפש תושיע במהרה בימינו. ברוך אתה אדוני משמח ציון בבניה. שמחנו אדוני אלוהינו באליהו הנביא עבדך, ובמלכות בית דוד משיחך. במהרה יבוא ויגל ליבנו, על כיסאו לא ישב זר, ולא ינחלו עוד אחרים מכבודו. כי בשם קודשך נשבעת לו, שלא יכפה נרוד עולם ועד. ברוך אתה אדוני מגן דוד.
אמן.
על התורה ועל עבודה ועל הנביאים ועל יום הכיפורים הזה, שנתת לנו אדוני אלוהינו, למחילה ולסליחה ולכפרה, לכבוד ולתפארת. על הכל אדוני אלוהינו אנחנו מודים לך ומברכים אותך. יתברך שמך בפי כל חי תמיד לעולם ועד, ודברך אמת וקיים לעד. ברוך אתה אדוני מלך מוחל וסולח לעוונותינו ולעוונות עמו בית ישראל, ומבהיר אשמותינו בכל שנה ושנה, מלך על כל הארץ, מקדש ישראל ביום הכיפורים.
Amen. Shekoach, Rabbi Jenny, beautiful job. Kol hakavod. This time we turn to page 288 in our Machzorim. We rise together to offer special prayers while the Torahs are out in honor of our country, in honor of the state of Israel. We have honorees that will come forward this time. On page 288 at the bottom. Stacy, are you the prayer for country? Yes, okay. So Stacy will offer here a prayer for the United States of America.
Our God and God of our ancestors, with mercy accept our prayer on behalf of our country and its government. Pour out your blessings upon this land, upon its leader, its judges, officers, and officials who are devoted in good faith to the needs of the public. Instruct them with the laws of your Torah and help them understand your rules of justice, so that peace and security, happiness and freedom will never depart from our land. We pray, Adonai, our God, whose spirits in all creatures, awaken that spirit within all the inhabitants of our land. Uproot from their hearts hatred and malice, jealousy and strife. Plant among those of different nationalities and faiths who dwell in our nation love and companionship, peace and friendship. May it therefore be your will that our land will be a blessing to all who dwell on earth and cause them to dwell in friendship and freedom. Speedily fulfill the vision of your prophets. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. For all of them, from the least of them to the greatest, shall know me. And let us say,
Amen. Thank you so much. Yes, and Chava, Vakasha. We're so honored to have Chava offer us the prayer for the state of Israel in Hebrew or English. We prefer Chava on page 289. Vakasha.
אבינו שבשמיים, צור ישראל וגואלו, ברך את מדינת ישראל שתהיה ראשית צמיחת גאולתנו. הגן עליה בעברת חסדך, ופרוש עליה סוכת שלומך, ושלח אורך ועמיתך לראשיה, שריה ויועציה, ותקנם בעצה טובה מלפניך. חזק את ידי מגיני ארץ קודשנו, והנחילם אלוהינו ישועה, ועטרת ניצחון תיאטרם. ונתת שלום בארץ ושמחת עולם ליושביה, ונאמר אמן.
Amen. Amen.
אבינו שבשמיים, stronghold and redeemer of the people of Israel, bless the state of Israel that it may be the beginning of our redemption. Shield it with your love, spread over it the shelter of your peace. Guide its leaders and advisors with your light and your truth. Help them with your good counsel. Strengthen the hands of those who defend our holy land. Deliver them, crown their efforts with triumph. Bless the land with peace and its inhabitants with lasting joy. And let us say,
Amen.
Tovah, beautifully done. So friends, at this time you may be seated, everyone. May be seated. You'll notice on page 290, we're going to begin in just a moment the Yizkor service. I recognize our tradition for some is that if you have living parents to leave the sanctuary or leave our davening space for the Yizkor service, if you're going to choose to do that, I invite you to do that now, as quietly as you can, and to make your way not only out of the sanctuary, but please out of the building itself, just to be safe and careful, not to gather in the lobby. Ya, 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 ya. Ya, 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 So friends, I'm going to say a few words in honor of Yizkor, a small sermon, so I'm going to remove my mask for this. This is for many of us, the holy of holies of prayer services throughout the year. This Yizkor service. And although it is painful, it's particularly painful given how many in our country and our world have died, particularly of COVID, and we're holding in our hearts. But even those who sadly have died in our own congregation just in recent weeks, and those throughout the world, including soldiers serving in Afghanistan, and others in our community, our country, and our world who have truly suffered and we've lost just in this recent time. But Yizkor is not just a time to reflect on those we've lost recently, although that is acute, some in this past year. It's also a time to look back on our own lives over years, what the losses we've had, the missing pieces of our heart, which it may have been many years, but it can feel like yesterday. And I want to offer one particular kavanah, an intention for this Yizkor. I was very touched to have the opportunity to experience this particular piece of the mourning and grieving process this past year, even under COVID. And I wanted to share it with you, with this chevra here, who I think will understand probably the most of what this one particular member of our community sadly went through. Let me frame it like this. So on Yom Kippur, like all of our holidays basically, when you look in the Torah, it talks about sacrifices. In fact, Rabbi Jenny spoke beautifully about the issue of kapara. It's about sacrifices for atonement, especially on Yom Kippur. And the sacrifices back in the Torah, as described, were actual animals, actual slaughtering. And according to what the Torah describes, one of the many reasons why we do sacrifices at that time, of course don't do them anymore, is it said the smell of the sacrifice, or sacrifices, created something called a reach nichoach ladonai. Reach nichoach means a pleasing smell to God. So the idea, it appears, biblical scholars will tell you, is that when there was a slaughtering and a kind of burning of the flesh of the animal, it was a pleasing smell to God. It was kind of an offering to God in that way. So putting aside that ancient practice, and not everyone clearly is into sacrifices, it's a challenging text in itself. But what it does teach is that God and spirituality and emotion is not just in what we see or even in what we chant in our prayers. It's all of the senses. It's what we smell, it's even what we taste, and it's what we touch. That spirituality and memory and connection with the power that's greater than us goes through all the senses. That, I think, is quite profound. Why? So this past year or so, maybe it was a year and a half ago, there was a particular congregant who was struggling. Her children wanted this congregant to clear finally and to donate a lot of the clothing and materials, some you might say heirlooms, not to throw them away and not to toss them to the side. But she, the wife, the widow, she was unable to begin moving on with her life until she found a way to even, frankly, just open the closet and begin to take some of the space in the closet away. And the kids and they struggled with it. It sat there for a few years, even the way his watch was placed, certain pictures, his military service medals, and understandably, she struggled, and the children, with wanting to even touch them. But the time had come, she had realized, the kids had realized, that this room, the sanctuary room, was becoming a block towards any attempt to live, to actually live. And a discernment process had to begin of what to keep and what might be better served for example, someone who is homeless and in need of some clothing, or someone who's applying for a job with just dress for success, if you know, for example, who possibly could use this suit. And they understood that, but they were struggling. And so they called and said, Rabbi, would you come over and be with us while we essentially clean out my husband and father's space, his study area. So when we went together and we went to this room, this area, and I saw all the beautiful things, as we walked through each piece of clothing even, the wife would say, I remember when he wore this jacket. And she would touch it, remembering how he held her with the feeling of the fabric on her cheek or her arm. And she pulled another shirt close, that the smell of the shirt, the cologne he wore, that was faded, obviously, but you could sense it, and she knew it was him. And she even pulled out his tallis. It's traditional to be buried with your tallis, but in other situations, some choose to pass on the tallis to the next generation. And she showed the tzitzit, the tzitzis on the side, which actually reminded me of when I used to sit with my grandfather, may he rest in peace, on Kol Nidre and Yom Kippur and play with the tzitzit of my grandfather while we prayed these holy services. And one by one, she told me stories about a lot of the things that were there. They weren't just clothing or a jacket or a particular tchotchke. These were pieces that she could touch, smell. I've heard you tell me stories, friends, that you can still taste the matzah ball soup. You can smell the house that you grew up in when Shabbat dinner was coming in, or Rosh Hashanah dinner. Just thinking about this little vort, I was remembering what it was like in my house, in my shul, growing up, right at the end of Yom Kippur, when they started setting up the food. There's a certain smell to the lox and the herring and all that's starting to go out there. All of that is wrapped up in spirituality. All of that is wrapped up in our feelings about God and the power beyond us. And all of that is absolutely connected to us and how we remember the people we love. So on this Yom Kippur, in honor and memory of that wonderful family who did the courageous work of course, holding on to some of the items. Not all of them were given away. Some will be kept forever. But in honor of that tough work, that's the kind of tough work we're doing here in Yizkor. And for those of you that are at home, I invite you, perhaps, if you have some item, something you can actually pull to hold during the Yizkor service in your dwelling, wherever you are, I invite you perhaps now to take a hand of it, to grab it, to place it with you. And for all of you that are here at shul who, may not be able to do that, maybe some of you here are wearing the talis or have the talis bag or have a kippah of someone, in your holding. But even if you're not, in a few moments when we take quiet time, I want you to do like God did with the pleasing odor. Maybe to close your eyes and not just to think of the people who you miss desperately and who've left this earth, but maybe there are specific smells or tastes or there's a touch that you have to imagine it. It's not here physically, but I'm sure it's so close to your heart and your soul, you know exactly how to bring it in. That's what we want to bring in this Yizkor. We want to bring not only the people close, but the parts of the sensations that hold them close, that remind us of them, and we honor them specifically this Yom Kippur, just like God did with every single sacrifice. So I invite everyone at this time, if you'd like to close your eyes. Some choose to cover their head in their talit or to close their eyes in a certain way. And to open your heart to who you're holding and to let all your senses bring them together. And after some time of quiet, we'll continue with the Yizkor service. Adonai, ma adam v'tedaehu, ben enosh v'techashvehu. Adonai, what are human beings that you take account of them, mortals that you care for them? Humans are as a breath, their days like a passing shadow. In the morning they flourish anew, in the evening they shrivel and die. Teach us to count each day, that we may acquire a heart of wisdom. On this solemn day, we each make judgments for the quality of our life. We re-examine our deeds and relationships with our community and with others. We express our yearnings for a new year, a new beginning, a year during which we commit ourselves to work toward bringing health and peace to all. We long for a year when individually and communally we shall strive to live in a way that is more reflective of ideals that we cherish. Now, in the midst of looking at our life and assessing its quality, we pause to reflect and to remember and to dedicate ourselves anew. The deaths of those we now remember left holes in our lives, but we are grateful for the gift of their lives, and we are strengthened by the blessings that they left us and the precious memories that comfort and sustain us as we recall them today. On this Yom Kippur 5782, we recall the following members of Beth Meyer Synagogue who sadly died in this past year, 5781. We recall lovingly Morton Brezhnev and Hank Landau. Some of us recall parents who watched over us, nursed us, guided us, and sacrificed for us. Some of us lovingly call to mind a wife, husband, or partner with whom we were truly united in our hopes and our pains, in our failures and our achievements, and our joys and our sorrows. Some of us remember brothers and sisters who grew up together with us, sharing in the play of childhood and the youthful adventure of discovering life's possibilities, bound to us by a heritage of family tradition and by years of togetherness and love. Some of us call to mind children, entrusted to us too briefly, to whom we gave our loving care and from whom we received a trust that enriched our lives. So many of us recall beloved relatives and friends whose affection, devotion enhanced our lives and whose visible presence will never return to cheer, encourage, or support us. Though they are gone, we are grateful for the blessings they brought to our lives. We are sustained and comforted by the thought that their presence in our lives remains an enduring blessing that we can bequeath to others. We can show our devotion to them by our devotion to those ideas that they cherished. O God of love, make us worthy of the love we have received by teaching us to love you with all our heart, with all our soul, and with all our might, and to spread the light of your divine love on all whose lives touch ours. Give us strength to live faithfully, for we are cheered by our confidence that you will not permit our lives to be wasted, but will bring all your worthy strivings to live on, even as we may not see their fulfillment. At this time, we rise as the ark is opened, and we transfer the Sifrei Torah to two other honorees. As the ark is open, I invite you to turn to page 291 and to take time now to use the Hebrew or English prayer, Yizkor, to remember specifically, to hold in your heart specifically those in your circle, in your world, in your life who are no longer with us, but you hold specifically this Yom Kippur. So each of us, Yizkor prayers 291. Yizkor Elohim, et Nishmat. Sabi, Sabati Shulamam, Chinina, Devstakaba, Nishmat, Anatiana, Teshut. Tam, We turn now to page 292. Rabbi Jenny will offer first an El Malei Rachamim in honor of the 6 million.
El Malei Rachamim במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהרים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמות כל אחינו בני ישראל, שנטבחו בשואה, אנשים, נשים וטף, שנחנקו, שנשרפו, ושנהרגו, שמסרו את נפשם, הקידוש השם, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. ענה ברחמים, הסתירם בסתר, כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens, the souls of the men, women, and children of the house of Israel, who were slaughtered, strangled, and burned in the Shoah. May they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. Adonai is their portion. May they rest in peace. And let us say together,
Amen.
Amen. At the top of 292, I offer now a special Yizkor prayer in memory of the martyrs, to those that gave their lives in defense of our country, the United States of America, in defense of the state of Israel, those who've died in acts of terror and violence, simply for being Jews, simply for being Americans, and standing up for our highest values. May God remember the souls of the martyrs of our people, of all American citizens, American soldiers, those defending our country and defending the state of Israel, who gave their lives for the sanctification of God's name. In their memory, do we pledge tzedakah. May their bravery, their dedication, and their purity be reflected in our lives. May their souls be bound up in the bond of life. May they rest in peace forever in God's presence. And let us say together,
Amen.
Amen. And now on page 293, in honor of all those we hold, all deceased, we hold close to our hearts in our congregation and the world, El Malei Rachamim for all.
El Malei Rachamim, Shochen במרומים, המצא מנוחה נכונה, תחת כנפי השכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהרים, כזוהר הרקיע מזהירים, לנשמות כל אלה שהזכרנו היום לברכה, שהלכו לעולמם, בגן עדן תהי מנוחתם. ענה ברחמים, הסתירם בסתר, כנפיך לעולמים. וצרור בצרור החיים את נשמותיהם, אדוני הוא נחלתם, וינוחו בשלום על משכבותיהם ונאמר אמן.
Exalted, compassionate God, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure, whose radiance is like the heavens, the souls of all those we have recalled today. May their memory be a blessing, and may they rest in paradise. Master of mercy, may they find eternal shelter beneath your sheltering wings, and may their souls be bound up in the bond of life. Adonai is their portion, may they rest in peace, and let us say together,
Amen.
Mizmor LeDavid.
מזמור לדוד,
Adonai roi lo esar, v'hinot asher arbitzeni, amei meluchot ינעלני. נפשי ישובר, נפשי ישובר, ינחני למען צדק, למען שמו. Gam ki elech begets al lo hirara ki adayim adi shivtecha umishantecha shivtecha umishantecha hema yelamuni Tara levanai shulchan, Tara levanai shulchan, Tara levanai shulchan, neged zorai, Dishanta v'shemen roshi, Dishanta v'shemen roshi. Dishanta v'shemen roshi kol zirevayai Agdol Agdol v'chesed Yidevuni kol yemei hayai Shavdi beveit Adonai, Shavdi beveit Adonai, Together in English, Psalm 23 on page 293. Together a Psalm of David. Adonai is my shepherd, I shall not want. God give me repose in green meadows and guides me over calm waters. God will revive my spirit and direct me on the right path, for that is God's way. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are at my side. Your staff and your rod comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and kindness shall be my portion all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai in the fullness of time. Together on 294, we honor the memory. May they all be for a blessing. Mourners Kaddish, page 294. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shmei Rabbah. Be'alma divra kirutei v'yamlich malchutei. B'chayechon uvyomechon uvchaye dechol beit Yisrael. Ba'agala uvizman kariv v'yimru amen. Yehei shmei Rabbah mevarach leolam olamei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yithalal shmei Kedusha b'richu. Le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tushbechata v'nechemata. Da'amiran v'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya, v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. Friends, this concludes our Yizkor service. We are going to now return the Sefer Torah back to the Ark. We do so with Yahalelu on page 296.
Yehalelu et Shem Adonai, ki nizkar Shemo levado, Hodo al eretz v'shamayim, vayaren geher le'amo, tila lechol hasida, livnei Yisrael am gerovo, Hallelujah, Hallelujah. Et Haimi lemachzik Gmar v'tomheha meushar deracheha derchena lehon esivoteha Shalom,
Hashivenu Adonai Eleha Venashuva Kaddish Kaddish Yaveinu Kaddish Yaveinu Kaddish Kaddish Yaveinu Kaddish Yaveinu Okay, Gmar Tov, everyone. Gmar Hatimah, Tovah, a good sealing. Please, God, in the book of life. It's not easy to give a sermon immediately after intense Yizkor, but do our best. And my style, I like to offer something a little lighter, so I know it's not going to be easy to offer after Yizkor, but hang with me here. Okay. I feel like this sermon I got to give here on this Yom Kippur, on this day of atonement, day of kapara, Rabbi Jay said, should be on the one hand, you're going to be like, duh, Rabbi, this is like so obvious. It's such an obvious message. One would think it's an obvious message. But we clearly have a tension going on in our society today around this issue. Maybe some confusion about what is the clear, what I would consider Jewish Torah message about the issues of apologies, of offering apologies, of the willingness to say one is sorry, that this is considered of the highest Jewish values. If you consider the biggest day on our calendar is the day where essentially we're saying sorry all day, you get the point of what the Jewish take is on apologies. But let me just frame what I think is the tension going on here, the interesting moment, and do this to a little bit of a story. I want to credit one of my children for giving this nice story to me a couple months ago. So some of you, I'm sure very few are Beth Meyer, but in the world, there is something called ultimate fighting, or they call it mixed martial arts. If you don't know what it is, it's the next stage, kind of, boxing, okay? And in this thing, you go into a cage, and there are fighters, and they're basically, within some limitations, allowed to really go after each other with blood and gore. I admit, my father, he's probably watching, he's a lover of boxing. I have appreciation for boxing. I'm not a huge fan of the ultimate fighting, but some of you will know the champion, or was champion, is a guy from Ireland named, I'm going to mess it up, Conor McGregor. Everyone knows Conor McGregor. Conor McGregor. In fact, he's famous for he walks like this. If you see him, anyway, I can tell from your response, you don't know who he is. If you know who he is, you know who he is, okay? Conor McGregor is famous, and he is well known. He has a kind of Muhammad, for those who know Muhammad Ali, may rest in peace, Muhammad Ali ability to speak in ways that really fire up, upset. We'll just say that arrogance is something that he has a PhD in, okay? He can upset people with what he says left and right. And over the past, believe it or not, in the Jewish year, although he's not Jewish, don't worry, okay? He became the champion not only of one weight class, but of two weight classes. The first champion to do that in mixed martial arts at one time. You're going to be like, Rabbi, why are you telling me this story? Just wait. And in the course of promoting these fights, this guy is a multi-zillionaire. He's done very, very well, okay? he says really provocative, hurtful, offensive things to his opponents. And some of you know, like do the weigh-in. He's the kind of guy that will go and try to fight during the weigh-in. He's incredibly provocative, okay? Now, he'd done so many terrible things and said so many things. And a few of the children in my house tend to watch some of the clips of these things, okay? And they said, but you got to see this, what Conor McGregor said now. You won't believe it, blah, 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 blah. So, he says all these terrible things. He finally wins the second fight. He becomes the only fighter at that time that had won 2 weight classes in the history of mixed martial arts. He had spoken horribly, disgustingly to all of his opponents, and he takes the microphone at the end of the match in front of millions of people, mostly watching on pay-per-view TV, and he says, I want to take this moment in front of everyone after I've won this championship. I want to take this opportunity to apologize. And I turned to my son, Adi. I said, see, sweetie, finally he saw the light. He said, I want to take this moment to apologize to absolutely nobody. Gavalt Hashem, take me now, okay? I was like, sweetie, don't listen to that, okay? Now, he does that. Let's just be clear. I don't think he brings that home to his wife. I don't know if he's married, by the way, because that's not going to work very well, okay? Because this idea, I'll apologize to absolutely nobody, it's a show. It's a show. It's meant to entertain. If he really believes that, then that's another opinion I have about him, all right? He does it to irk people. But this idea seems to be prevalent, even in 57, 81, 82, that somehow apologizing is weak or groveling or unmasculine in that gender dynamic, whatever that might be, right? That somehow apologizing is something that weak people do. It's not what strong people do. Now, I want to be so crystal clear about this because just before Yom Kippur, the new prime minister of the state of Israel, Naftali Bennett, who in a phone call, tragically, if you follow Israeli news, it happened in the past few days. There was an Israeli soldier who sadly was killed in a terrorist kind of attack, a fight, basically a battle fight on the Gaza border. And in the phone call with the father of the deceased son, by accident, Prime Minister Bennett said the name incorrectly of the deceased soldier. And when he did it, he immediately realized and apologized. And later, when he was questioned about by the media, right before Yom Kippur, he said, I apologize. I apologize then, and I apologize again for the horrible mistake of my leadership and conduct in that moment. There seems to be no problem with the prime minister of our state of Israel apologizing. And not only that, this past year, some of you remember, get a little bit into contemporary politics. There was a moment this past year, or year-ish, again, Jewish year, when a former President Trump went to do a visit to the local church outside the White House, if you remember that experience, when he held a Bible in front of the church, and next to him was the Joint Chief of Staff, Mark Milley. Mark Milley, if you look at I Googled it because I want to make sure I got it right for the sermon. He has so many medals on his thing, I think it would droop down like this, including 3 bronze medals for valor for fighting in war zones. And he stood by former President Trump while this experience happened in uniform, if you remember. After it was over, he gave a video, commencement address to one of the academies where he was going to just give a commencement address. But at the beginning of it, he decided, after reflection, that he was going to apologize. He said, I should have never been in full uniform present in that place. There should be a clear distinction between the military and its commitments and political leadership. I should not have been there. It was an error, but that what I represented was wrong, and I apologize. And he was attacked by certain people that said, to quote, make sure I get this right here, that this was an embarrassing and groveling apology. I've never seen this general grovel and be weak and embarrassing. Instead, he did what great Jewish leaders did and do, is he stood up and he apologized. That is the right behavior. That is the Jewish behavior. That is the Torah behavior. I'm going to give you just 2 examples of this that one I think is kind of quite obvious for Yom Kippur, and one you might be a little less connected to or less familiar with because it's back in the aspect of the Tanakh that you may have not read as closely because it's not as risen up. But I want to bring 2 examples. One on Yom Kippur itself, just read in the Torah portion for this week, for Yom Kippur. It says, we would offer these sacrifices up in the tabernacle, etc. Eventually it was at the temple in Jerusalem. We offered sacrifices. And it says the high priest, who's in charge of the entire day, wearing special clothing, white clothing, going and representing the entirety of the Jewish people before God, he goes and it's his first. Before he asks for forgiveness for the entire Jewish people for our sins, he first asks forgiveness for himself in his sins and for his household. Now you think, well, that's such a big deal. But back then, if you look at the Torah, he was offering his prayers in front of hundreds of thousands of people. So basically, he's getting up in front of 100,000 people and saying, I messed up this year. My family messed up this year. And I'm not ashamed to put that in front of everybody. The high priest, close to God, is a human being like everybody else who makes mistakes. And it's no problem for him to apologize. That's one example. Another one, and this is the one I want to bring home strong, is King David. You know, there are 3 classic kings in ancient Israel. Saul was the first, David was the second, and the third was the absolute best. Solomon. You guys know? Okay, all right, Solomon. All right, there are more kings. Those are the 3 classic beginning of the kingdom, of the Commonwealth, all right? King David, who's famous, King David, he beat Goliath. King David, his famous gingy red hair. He played musical instruments. He wrote the book of Psalms. He's a poet. He's a shepherd. Psalm 23. He is like King David, David Melech Yisrael. We sing songs about David Melech Yisrael. He's unbelievably honored. But King David did not always do such kosher things, okay? If you look in the book of Samuel, it's not in the Torah, it's in the prophetic section, 2nd book of Samuel, King David one day is out in the palace enjoying himself, looks over in Yerushalayim down, and he sees a beautiful woman down there bathing. Not much clothing on, by the way, okay? He says, I want this one. Not very nice, by the way, not a very, not a very Me Too moment, especially, okay? Says, finds out she's married. Who's she married to? Uriah. Who's Uriah? Uriah is like the Army Rangers, Navy SEALs of the ancient Israel army. And they just advise her, said, what are you doing? You can't. First of all, she's married. Think about, she's married to like your top soldier, your top people. He's like, no, I'll take care of it. He sends the soldiers off to war. I'm fast forwarding here. And he puts Uriah in the front of a war that is going to be potentially lost. And he directs all the soldiers to pull back and leave him alone to be killed, which he is. He then marries Bathsheba. That's her name, Bathsheba, by the way. And they have a family. And in a family. They're together and married and do have a family. It's true. But the bottom line is one day his friend, a prophet named Natan, comes to him one day and basically says to him through a parable. You should read it. It's a great story, powerful story. There's a guy who's acting terribly, and he's stolen from someone else. What should happen? And King David says, he should be attacked. If someone steals, they should have the consequences. And Natan says, you're the man who stole. You stole this woman from Uriah. You killed him. You're liable. You're responsible. And King David in that moment doesn't say, oh, it's weak and groveling to apologize. I'm being too embarrassed to apologize. I'm a king. I don't need to apologize. He says, Chatati ladonai. Right in front of his Natan, in front of his family, in front of all the people, Chatati ladonai, which means I sinned. Al chet chatati. Before God, I sinned. It's very interesting, by the way. It doesn't say I sinned before Uriah, or I sinned before Bathsheba, or I sinned before my parents, which is all true. He says I sinned before God, and the commentary on that is because he did sin before God. When you sin before people, you also sin before God. You can't come to Yom Kippur and say, well, I'll work out my stuff with people later. I'll only work out with God on Yom Kippur. No. Your relationship with God and your relationship with people is all intertwined. So when he says, I sin before God, what he's really saying is, I sin before all of God's creatures. I sin before too many people to name. and I am most embarrassed that I've done this before God as the King of Israel. And I apologize. So I think I've made it pretty clear that if King David can apologize, and the high priest can apologize, then I'm not so in the camp of Conor McGregor and his Michigas, okay? But I want to come back and say why this touched me so much this year. Because I'm sure a lot of you are saying, of course, Rabbi, we should apologize. This is the Jewish way. I get it. You made your point. Okay, we'll move on. Well, hold on. Okay? Because this past year, I had a very profound experience, people in our shul, where I realized that I think this issue needs some deeper evaluation. Because I'm worried. I'm concerned. How do I know? It's anecdotal. But I want to know, be sure that everyone here understands that this apology is not theoretical. It's each and every one of us. Rabbis, doesn't matter who you are, leaders, everybody's responsible for being able to apologize and willing to apologize. How did this happen? So some of you know, and sadly, or actually it's been a privilege, but when someone is dying, when they're in their last breath, if possible, and it's not always possible, but if it's possible, there's something called the vidui and the final Shema. The vidui is very similar to Yom Kippur. It's a final confession that the person who is near death, called in Hebrew a goses, ideally can recite for themselves. But of course, that rarely happens. And what happens is me or Rabbi Jenny, we come with the family, if it's possible. Again, the timing doesn't always happen this way, but if it does, and we, on their behalf, offer the vidui. We say, on your behalf, we apologize, we for the following sins. And it's kind of, there's a set formula, but we add to it as well. We also have the person forgive the people around for things that happen that are unresolved. So it's an issue of forgiveness and apology that all happens at that end. So I had one of these experiences this past year under COVID, but we still made it with Mass. Went down to the Transitions Hospice, if you guys know, near Wade Avenue over there, at a very holy place. And we're there, and I offer these prayers, and it is powerful, and we're there, and the person that is near death, he's unconscious. So the prayers conclude, which is very common. I'm crying, they're crying, and we know that he has little time left. It ended up being a few more hours. After it was over, one of the daughters was crying so hysterically, so strong, that I tried to console her. How do you console with COVID? But, trying to console, trying to show some support, trying to show some understanding. And she said to me, Rabbi, I'm not just crying because my father is about to die. I'm not just crying because we had this incredibly powerful experience here. I said, well, why? I'm crying because this is the first time in my life that my father ever apologized to me. I said, she said, exactly. So I bring this home to you, to all of us. We have limited time on this earth. None of us is perfect. There is nothing weak or groveling, embarrassing about making a mistake and saying you're sorry. And the time to say you're sorry is now. Not, sadly, when Rabbi Jenny and I are there doing it on your behalf. We all have a choice to make this Yom Kippur. Do we want to be like the high priest? Do we want to be like King David? Or do we want to be like an idiot like Conor McGregor? The choice is obvious. It's obvious. In the ring between Conor McGregor and King David. Conor McGregor. So be like King David. Be like the high priest. It's no big deal. And in fact, you will be seen on Yom Kippur modeling the highest Jewish behavior for yourself, for the people you love, and for other generations. They'll know you stood up for what matters. You were strong because you apologized, not weak. May we all, with God's help, have the strength to apologize to all those we may have hurt this year, and any year, this Yom Kippur and going forward. Gmar, Hatimah, Tovah.
So we continue now with the Musaf invite you to rise on page 298 for Chatzi Kaddish. Yitkada veyitkada Sheberach V'yalma divrach hirute v'yamlich malchuteh v'chayechonu v'yomechon v'chayecho beit Yisrael b'gala u'bizman kariv v'yimeru Amen yesh v'rava mevora ve'olam ha'ya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbahar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudesham b'rihu le'ela le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran ve'alma ve'yimeru Amen.
So here we place our feet together for the Amidah of Musaf. Begins on page 313. We're going to daven together as a congregation from 313 through the Unatana Tokef and Kedusha. Together as a congregation, I will guide you. And the rest will be done silently. This is the longest Amidot in our tradition. So again, take your time. Don't use the words as inspiration. Don't be focused on every little piece. It may be overwhelming. When it comes time for sins, remember to add your own. Don't just be limited by the ones listed in the Machzor. They're meant to be inspiration for you to look deep inside of your heart and your soul in what ways you want to change and grow in the year to come. So begin together, feet together. Musaf Amidah, page 313, we begin the Amidah.
Baruch atah Adonai
Baruch Shemo
Eloheinu Ve'Elohei Avotenu Imotenu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Ve'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah Elohei Rivka Elohei Rachel Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol Hagibor Ve'Hanora El Elyon Gomer Hasadim Tovim Ve'Koneh HaKol Ve'Zocher Chasdei Avot V'Imot U'Mevi Goel Livnei V'neihem Le'eman Shemo B'Yahava Misod Chachamim U'Nevonim U'Milemed Dat Mevinim Eftecha Fi B'Tfila U'B'Tachanunim Lechalot U'Lchanen Pnei Melech Malei Rachamim Mocher V'Soleach Lavonim Zoreinu L'chaim Melech Haaretz V'chaim Zoreinu L'chaim Melech Haaretz V'chaim
L'Elohim, Elohim Chayim.
מלך עוזר ופוקר מושיע ומגן. ברוך אתה אדוני.
Baruch Shemo.
מגן אברהם ופוקר
Amen.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחיים מתים, אתה רב להושיע.
Me'akel Chayim, Ezer, E'ayim Eitim, E'ramim Rabim, Shomech Noflim, E'rov Echolim, Umatir Asurim,
ומקיים אמונתו לשני עפר. מי כמוך בגבורות ומתו מלך, מלך ממית ומחיה ומצמיח ישועה. מי כמוך אב הרחמים, זוכר צוריו לחיים מרחמים, ונאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני.
Baruch Shemo.
מחיי המתים.
Amen. We turn now to page 315 for the powerful Unatana Tokef as the ark is open. This prayer really speaks to the themes of this day, what it means to appreciate life and honor our own mortality, to recognize that at any moment life can change, things can change, and to not take life for granted. So Unatana Tokef, page 315.
ובכן, ולך תעלה קדושה, כי אתה אלוהינו מלך מוחל וסולח, ונתן לתוקף קדושת היום, כי הוא נורא והיום, כי הוא נורא והיום.
Let us speak of the sacred power of this day, profound and awe-inspiring. On it, your sovereignty is celebrated, and your throne, from which you rule in truth, is established with love. Truly, you are a judge and prosecutor, expert and witness, completing the indictment, bringing the case, and enumerating the counts. You recall all that is forgotten, will open the book of remembrance, which speaks for itself, for our own hands have signed the page.
ותפתח את ספר הזיכרונות, ומאליו יקרא וחותם יד כל אדם בו, ובשופר גדול ייתקע לקודם המדקה, יישמע ומלאכים יחפזון, וחילו רדה יוחזון, ויאמרו הנה יום הדין, הנה יום הדין, לבכור על צבא מרום בדין, לבכור על צבא מרום בדין, כי לא יזכו בעיניך בדין, וכל באי עולם יעברון לפניך, כבני מרון, כבקרת רועד רו, מעביר צונו תחת שבטו, כן תעביר ותספור, ותמנה ותבכור, נפש כל חי, ותחתו כתבה לך בריאה, ותכתוב וגזר דינם
בראש השנה ייכתבון ויום צום כיפור ייעלמון.
כמה יעברון וכמה יברעון, מי יחיה ומי ימות, מי וקיצו ומי לא וקיצו. בראש השנה ייכתבון יום צום כיפור ייעלמון. מי באש ומי במים, מי בחרב ומי בחייל, מי ברב ומי בצמא, מי ברש ומי במגפה. בראש השנה ייכתבון יום צום כיפור יירדמון. מי בחניקה ומי בסקילה, מי ינוח ומי ינוע, מי ישקיט ומי יטורף, מי ישלב ומי יתייסר, מי עני ומי יעשיר, מי יושפל ומי ירום. בראש השנה ייכתבון יום צום כיפור יירדמון. Page 316, but tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah have the power to transform the harshness of our destiny. ותשובה ותפילה וצדקה מעבירים את רוע הגזר.
Continue on page 317 with the Kedusha.
יסוד שיח שרפי קודש המקדישים שמך בקודש, דרי מלאים דרי מטה, ככתוב על נביאך וכרזל זה, ואמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלוך על הארץ כבודו. כבודו מלא עולם משרתיו שונים זה לזה, היה מקום כבודו לעומתם, ברוך יאמרו ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקומו הוא יפן ברחמים ויחון עם יחד עם שמו ערב הבוקר בכל יום תמיד פעמיים ביעבם שמע אומרים שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו והוא ישמיענו ברחמיו שנית לעיני כל חי להיות לכם לאלוהים אני אדוני אלוהיכם אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד ובדברי קודשך כתוב לאמור
אם לא ראה לעולם ראה ציון לדור לדור ודור נגיד גודלך ונצח נצחים קדושתך נקדיש ושפחך אלוהינו מפינו למשה לעולם ועד כי על מלך גדול וקדוש אתה ברוך אתה אדוני ברוך שמו
המלך הקדוש.
Amen. We continue continue with silent prayer, silent Amidah, through page 325. Now on page 325, the ark is opened. So continue with the great Aleinu. It's customary to go all the way down and prostrate ourselves like the high priest did on these days of old. So if you're here in the sanctuary and you have the physical ability, I invite you to find a space and go all the way down. If you're at home on live stream as well, feel free to make some space for yourself to feel the sense of humility, of prostrating yourself down fully for the great Aleinu. Page 325. Aleinu leSheberach, ya 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 Ashamnu, Everyone, you may be seated now at this time. So, typically in this section of the Musaf, we've reached the time of our service of Ela Eskara. This or these I do remember. And this is the time when we, according to the Machzor, we look back in the history of our people and remember the time of persecutions thousands of years ago during Talmudic times under Emperor King Hadrian, who oppressed our people and sadly killed and tortured many great rabbis and was a great oppressor in our history, sadly different times in our history. What we've done here at Beth Meyer and other shuls have done, other B'tei Knesset, is that in lieu of going back thousands of years to look back to tragedies and crises and times of torture and attempts at extermination of our people, we don't need to look back that far. Now, the sad truth is that the Shoah, as the time has passed, many of us here, we've had the privilege here from this bima in our own congregation to have survivors come speak to us and tell us their stories live. But as we know, the time is passing and many of those survivors are no longer with us in this world. But we do have the blessing of having next generations come forward and pass on those stories, those sacred stories, specifically on Yom Kippur. And the idea is we come before God during the Musaf, during the middle of the prayer. This is not just a speech or a story, it's a prayer, really, to say, God, if you don't want to listen to our prayers because of us, we're mere mortals, at least listen to our prayers on behalf of all those who gave their lives, who suffered simply for being Jews, for following you, for following the Torah. And so each year we invite someone in our congregation to come forward and share their story. It's not easy, particularly in Yom Kippur with Yizkor. It's so heavy, obviously with fasting. But we are so blessed and grateful every year that people come forward to share the stories of their families and their lives. And so this year we've invited Grace Kaplan. We are so honored to have her, and she can start making her way up here, Grace. We're grateful. Who will share the story of her family and her family's experience in the Shoah. And as I ask each person, I say, please share your story as you feel comfortable, your family's story, and then what Yom Kippur means to you in this context. And Grace, we are so grateful for you making this time. It's a very difficult day. So also, you're allowed to take off your mask if you'd like. You also keep it on, whatever makes you comfortable. Okay?
L'shana tova, everyone.
L'shana tova. Let's make sure.
I think we have 7 or so hours to go until we can eat again. And Jonah tells me 30 pages until the end of the service. So we're getting there. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Grace Kaplan. My husband, Jonah, and I just celebrated our 5-year anniversary of moving to Raleigh. Since moving here, we have brought into the world our 2 sweet daughters, Rena, who attends preschool here at Beth Meyer, and Romy. I want to thank my husband, Jonah, for sitting down with me and scouring over my entire family history. Through this process, we've learned so much, and it's been so interesting. Jonah is, of course, the public speaker of our family, definitely not me, and so I'm grateful for his love and encouragement to do something out of my comfort zone. And thank you, Rabbi Eric, for inviting me to the Bima today and giving me a chance to do something that I actually haven't done probably since my bat mitzvah, which is to speak to the congregation. I will say the attendance today, in person and virtually, much bigger than it was that day at Temple Sinai in Fox Point, Wisconsin, a suburb of Milwaukee, and the weather today is a lot nicer too. The rabbis talked to us about a bat mitzvah as becoming of age, but as I think back to that time, looking out at my family and friends as a 12-year-old, there was no way for me to fully grasp the significance of that event or the miracle of one specific attendee, my grandfather, Herbert Fantel. Now to be up here, nearly 20 years later, to talk about him on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, there's a different kind of butterfly flying around my stomach. Yom Kippur ends the Aseret Yemei Shuvah, the 10 days of repentance. But Shuvah also means returning. And so today, I'm blessed to be here, returning to my roots and my heritage. And I know that by doing this, it will enable me to be the best version of myself in the new year. My grandpa's story starts in Vienna, the capital of Austria. Many historians regard the invasion of Poland on September 1st, 1939, as the beginning of World War II. Poland as well was perhaps the epicenter of European Jewry, 3.3 million Jews before the Shoah. Austria, though, and particularly Vienna, was home to a vibrant Jewish community and the first assault on European Jews outside Germany by the Nazis and their collaborators. In fact, Austria not only shares a border with Germany, they all speak the same language. My grandfather, Herbert Fantel, was born on March 18, 1929. His parents, my great-grandparents, were Franz and Irene. Franz, Irene, and my grandpa Herb lived together with Franz's parents in the 19th district of Vienna. Viennese Jews, in general, were more secular than they were observant. They loved being Austrian. They loved schnitzel and strudels, their music, and their art. Still, the Jewish community was strong, about 200,000 in Austria, almost all in Vienna. Jews actually made up 10% of the Viennese population. In the 1930s, Austria was still reeling from World War I, and Jews emerged as the popular scapegoat. As Hitler rose to power in Germany, he also gained popularity in nearby Austria. Except now, the Austrians didn't just speak German, they were also becoming fluent in hating Jews. On March 12, 1938, 7 months before Kristallnacht, and a year and a half before the Nazis invaded Poland, Hitler and the Nazis basically waltzed into Austria and were welcomed like heroes. My great-grandmother Irene actually took her 8-year-old son, my grandpa Herb, to the promenade in Vienna to watch from afar as hundreds of thousands of people greeted Hitler. My grandpa recalls how they stood from afar because his mother insisted they be there, but she was also fearful and wanted to make sure that they didn't get too close. That night, they decided that they had to leave Austria, but the family didn't know where to go or what to do. The next day, March 13th, Germany formally annexed Austria in what became known as the Anschluss. It was ratified by a public vote later that week. It got 99% of the vote, and Jews were forbidden to cast ballots. In the ensuing weeks and months, Vienna became the very first draft of the Nazis' final solution, the first iteration of a ghetto, the first deportations. Jews were harassed, fired from businesses, synagogues burned, homes were also looted, and the Nazis ordered all Jews to itemize and declare their personal property. The Vienna model, as it became known, gave the SS their trial and errors before the Nazis continued their blitz through Europe. As for the Fantels, they were miraculously spared at first. My great-grandfather, Franz's 2 brothers, Oscar and Joseph, were high-ranking officers and had fought for the Austrian army in World War I, which provided them with a layer of protection. Also during this time, my grandpa Herb came down with scarlet fever, which ironically turned into a benefit since the quarantine sign on their door kept the Nazis and their collaborators away as they went door to door, pulling Jews out of their homes. My grandpa Herb was pulled out of his school and forced to attend a school for only Jewish children. He said the kids yet were not wearing yellow stars, but those around him who were not Jewish stood out with their Nazi pins and buttons. Behind the scenes, Grandpa Herb's parents were still looking into leaving, as were most Jews in Austria. At the time, it was still very easy to get out of the country, but it was hard to find a country to take you in. Shanghai, China actually emerged as one destination, but it was very expensive to get there, and that priced out many families, including my own. Kristallnacht, the notorious riot against synagogues and Jewish businesses, would start on the night of November 9th, 1938. For my grandpa Herb, though, it began ominously that afternoon because his father, my great-grandfather, who was a banker at Länderbank, didn't come home from work that day. My great-grandfather Franz was actually arrested and sent to Dachau, the first Nazi concentration camp. After my great-grandmother Irene learned of her husband's arrest, my grandpa Herb said, quote, "That set my mother in motion. She had one thought in mind: I've got to get him out. The only way to do that, though, was to get visas. That finally happened, but not without one important wild card. Friends helped obtain 90-day visas to Great Britain. That means they could legally only stay there for 3 months, and then technically they'd have to return to Austria. My great-grandmother, though, thought it was worth the gamble. The other caveat was there were only 3 visas, meaning no one else from the Fantel family could go. Grandpa Herb said his mother, Irene, lived with that regret her whole life, having to leave the rest of their family behind. My great-grandfather, Franz, miraculously returned from Dachau on January 13th, 1939. My grandpa Herb said that his father was unrecognizable, bruised, beat up, and he had lost 40 pounds, 1/3 of his body weight. In some ways, he would never recover because he would suffer from seizures throughout the rest of his life. As they prepared to flee, my great-grandma Irene actually packed up as many of their belongings that would fit in a giant wooden storage lift. She put as much as she could in there, including the family's Busendorfer baby grand piano. And spoiler alert, the piano today is at my parents' house in Milwaukee, and I'll talk more about that. On June 10th, 1939, my grandpa Herb and his parents fled Austria with the enormous wooden lift and the equivalent of $15 in cash. As I mentioned before, there were no visas for anyone else in the family. He would learn later that they were deported and murdered either at the Loge Ghetto or Theresienstadt death camp. 2 sponsor families in Scotland arranged the transfer to Musselburgh, a suburb of Edinburgh. My grandpa Herb recalls those families, a Lord and Lady Mears and a Lord and Lady Walton, and said they were incredibly good to them. Now remember, that 90-day clock was ticking, so as nice as it was in Scotland, the gamble was my family would have to find something more permanent or be deported back to Austria. Thank God the gamble paid off. Not only did they get visas to go to the US, but the fact that they went to Scotland in the first place was kind of a miracle. Of the 200,000 Jews in Austria before the Shoah, more than 140,000 fled by 1940. But many would go to places like France, Hungary, Belgium, and Czechoslovakia, which would all become Nazi territory. Their fleeing Austria then only delayed their inevitable suffering. In August 1939, 2 months into the 3-month visa in Britain, my grandpa Herb and great-grandparents boarded a ship for New York. Ironically, it was aboard the Holland America line, the first of probably 30 to 40 cruises my grandpa Herb would take on a Holland America ship. He and my grandma were big cruisers, and I have no idea at that time whether or not there was a buffet on board. Probably not. The family would settle in a one-room apartment on New York's Lower East Side, but my great-grandparents had a hard time finding work. What supported the family for months was actually a big monetary gift from the Scottish families. To try to fit in more, they also were encouraged to add an E onto the end of their last name. HIAS, the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, told my great-grandfather about an opportunity in Austin, Minnesota, with Hormel Foods. That's right, my great-grandfather, the banker, could work for the company which introduced Spam to America. Fortunately or unfortunately, the Fantels arrived in Austin, Minnesota, only to find out the job wasn't available, but then pursued another opportunity in St. Paul, Minnesota. They settled there in the Twin Cities on April 1st, 1940, my grandpa being 11 at the time, and they never looked back. As Grandpa Herb grew up, he had a liking for baseball and math. He also enlisted in the Navy Reserves and spent time at an air base in Michigan. In 1955, he met and married my grandmother Betty. Grandpa would go on to get his master's degree, work at General Mills and Univac, and then start his own stock brokerage. My grandpa Herb and Grandma Betty had 2 sons, my Uncle Phil and my dad Dave. My grandpa died at age 89 on September 2nd, 2018, 7 months after becoming a great-grandfather to my daughter Rena. And I know I teased this before, but I'll fill you in on the Busendorfer baby grand piano. The storage lift made its way from Europe to Minnesota, which is just amazing to me, in 1941. And I only learned this recently, but my great-grandmother was actually a concert pianist playing on that piano, and she found out that her piano teacher was a Nazi and had a hard time playing ever again after that. And I do hope that my great-grandmother would be proud to know that I learned and played for many years on that same piano. As I stand here finishing the story, I come back to that idea of returning. Grandpa Herb actually returned to Austria 5 times between 1971 and 2008. The Austrian government, in fact, fully funded one of those visits in partnership with the Jewish Welcome Service. He attended synagogue there and met the Austrian president. My extended family has also returned to Austria, and a couple years ago placed a memorial plaque outside their apartment in the 19th district of Vienna. The Austrian government has lately done a lot of outreach to the Jewish families who fled, with programs paying for survivors' nursing home bills and long-term care. Austria has now also extended citizenship to survivors' descendants. So I am awaiting an Austrian passport for myself as well as our daughters, and soon we will officially be dual citizens. What amazed me is that after all of the family had to go through, my Grandpa Herb was always proud of being Austrian. He loved his home country. He also loved being Jewish. I'm not sure he meant it to be this way, but he was a model for how we can all live in the diaspora, a balancing act of identities. I think he also wanted us to know how Austria's history should forever be a warning, even to us in America. We are only welcome here until we are not. And if not for the Jewish community and other kind, thoughtful human beings looking out for one another, my grandpa and great-grandparents may not have made their way out to safety. Grandpa Herb was never religious. In fact, he didn't even have a bar mitzvah until he was 83. Rituals aside, though, he found other ways of affirming his Jewish identity. He and my grandma were extremely philanthropic to the St. Paul Jewish Community Center and the Holocaust Jewish Studies and Austrian programs at the University of Minnesota. It's at the University of Minnesota where my grandpa's story is recorded along with a portrait that was painted of him while he shared his story. I think of my grandpa often, his irreverent humor, his love of cruising, or even just his sitting in a chair with his legs crossed and arms folded, observing the family around him. He was not the most demonstrative man, but he expressed his love in his own ways. I think that was the way the pain from the Shoah and his childhood persisted. In closing, I want to call attention to the prayer that is normally recited at this time in Yom Kippur. It's a poem called Eila Ezkara. It means this is what I will remember. What's interesting is that it's in the singular, not plural. To me, that means we each must find meaning in our family's history and how we will become part of that history. Grandpa's Hebrew name was Yehezkel or Ezekiel, which means God will strengthen. How fitting then that God strengthened the resolve of my Grandpa Herb and his parents to not just survive the Holocaust, but to seek a new life of freedom and fulfillment. I pray that I will embody that strength and resilience in raising a Jewish family this year and every year. And so, Kreinu L'chaim, may God remember us for life. Amen.
Ani mamin, ani mamin, ani mamin, be'emunah shlema, be'viat
HaMashiach,
be'viat HaMashiach, ani mamin, v'yaf al pi she'yitameya, im kol zeh ani mamin.
Thank you so much, Grace, for gracing us with an unbelievable story. Your grandfather's soul is kind of blessing us here this Yom Kippur. We are so, so grateful. Tremendous, tremendous influence and tremendous teaching. And I do want to note that beautiful story about the family that helps support. What an unbelievable statement of those, how we can step up for each other, still to this day. And tremendous story. Thank you so much, Grace. Gavalt. We're coming to the closing of our Musaf prayers. We turn to page 346. Shema Koleinu. Hear our voice, Adonai our God. Be kind and have compassion for us, willingly and lovingly. Accept our prayer.
Shema Koleinu, Adonai Eloheinu, chuz v'rachem aleinu, v'kabel b'rachamim u'b'ratzon et tfilateinu, hashivenu Adonai Elecha v'nashuva Kaddish Yameinu Yekedem.
Page 347. Our God and God of our ancestors, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. Ki anu amecha.
Ki anu amecha ve'ata Eloheinu, anu amecha ve'ata Avinu, anu avadecha ve'ata Adonenu, anu le'alecha ve'ata Chelkeinu, anu nachlatecha ve'ata goraleinu, anu tzonecha ve'ata ro'einu, anu chamecha ve'ata noshreinu, anu ve'ulatecha ve'ata yosreinu, anu rayatecha ve'ata dodeinu, anu segulatecha ve'ata keroveinu, anu amecha ve'ata malkeinu, anu mamirecha ve'ata mamireinu. So if there are Kohanim and Levi'im here in our sanctuary today, we recognize with COVID not everyone felt comfortable coming. But if there are, we do invite them at this time to prepare for the duchening in just a few minutes. We turn now to page 348, for we rise together for the Ashamnu prayer, where we take our hands and prepare to beat our chest one more time. Our God and God of our ancestors, hear our prayer. Do not ignore our plea. Our God and God of our ancestors, we are neither so insolent nor so obstinate as to claim in your presence that we are righteous without sin, for we, like our ancestors that came before us, have sinned. Ashamnu, middle 348. Ashamnu, baganu, gazalnu, dibarnu, dovi, hevinu, ve'irshanu, zadnu, chamasnu, tafanu, sheker, yatznu ra, kizavnu, latznu, maradnu, niyatznu, sararnu, avinu, pashanu, tsararnu, kishinu, orev, rashanu, shichadnu, tiavnu, tainu, titanu. And I'll continue on page 351, the left side of the page. Responsively, I'll begin with the bold. Rabbi Jenny and the congregation italics. We begin, of course, with Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, and just the last few words in English. Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, unwillingly and willingly. V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha, through hardening our hearts.
Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, thoughtlessly.
V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha, in idle chatter.
Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, through sexual immorality.
V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha,
Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, knowingly and deceitfully.
v'al chet shechatanu lefanecha, by the way we talk.
Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, by defrauding others.
V'al chet shechatanu lefanecha, in our innermost thoughts.
Al Chet Shechatan Lefanecha, through forbidden trysts.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through empty confession.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by scorning parents and teachers.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך purposefully and by mistake.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by resorting to violence.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך by public desecration of your name.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha through foul speech.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through foolish talk.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha through pursuing the impulse to evil.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך wittingly and unwittingly.
Together, for all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us
atonement.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha through denial and deceit.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך by taking bribes.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by clever cynicism.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך by speaking badly of others.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by the way we do business.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך in our eating and drinking.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by greed and oppressive interest.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through arrogance.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha in everyday conversation.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through conspiratorial glances.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha through condescension.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through ego.
Together, for all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by throwing off all restraint.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך by rashly judging others.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by plotting against others.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through selfishness.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha through superficiality.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through stubbornness.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by rushing to do evil.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through gossip.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha through empty promises.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך through baseless hatred.
Al chet shetchatanu lefanecha by betraying a trust.
ועל חטא שחטאנו לפניך by succumbing to confusion.
Together, for all these sins, forgiving God, forgive us, pardon us, grant us atonement. So at this time, we invite our Kohanim to come forward to the bima. Ark is open. Page 356. It's customary to close your eyes and cover your eyes, perhaps to cover yourself with a talit with people around you, or to imagine people with you that you'd like. The idea is not to watch with your eyes, but to really feel it with your soul, the blessing with your soul.
Kohanim. Yivarechecha Adonai V'yishmerecha Yair Adonai Panav Elecha Vichuneka Lecha V'yasem Lecha Shalom. Shalom, shalom, la'rachok v'la'karov, amar Adonai, urfativ. Peace, peace to those who are far off. Peace to those who are near, says Adonai, and I shall heal them.
Page 357, the bottom, B'Sefer Chaim.
B'Sefer Chaim bracha v'shalom, parnasa tova, nizacher v'nikatev lefanecha anachnu, v'chol amcha bet Yisrael, lechaim tovim u'l'shalom.
So right now we invite the Shekmans to come forward to the Bima to open the Ark for Hayom, page 358.
Hayom, 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 hayom de'amseinu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom devacheinu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom tigadleinu, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom. Hayom, 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 hayom tidrashenu letovah, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom tidrashenu lechaim tovim, amen. Hayom, 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 hayom תקבל ברחמים רצון את תפילתנו, אמן. היום, 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 היום תשמע שבתנו, אמן. היום, 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 היום תתמכנו בצדקך.
Shalom. The Shekman's close the ark. You may be seated, everyone. Kaddish Shalem, page 359. You may be seated. V'yigada Shem Merabah Me'et Alma Dirach Yiruteh V'yamlir Malchuteh V'hayehonu V'yom Echad Hayedecho Beit Yisrael La'agala U'bizman Kariv V'yiru Amen Yehi Shem Merabah Le'olam Yitbarach v'yishtavah, yitbarach v'yitrama, v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar, v'yitaleh, v'yitalah.
Shemei Kedusha
Berichu le'ela, le'ela, v'yidor shirata, v'shirata, tishbechata, v'nechemata, v'yamiram v'yama, v'yimru. Amen. Titkaber tzelotot, uvoton b'chol Yisrael, kadama v'hon b'vishaya, v'yimeru. Amen. Yehi shalom rabba min Shemaya,
L'chaim Aleinu
v'yach Yisrael Amen. Oh, say shalom b'imroma, oh, say shalom aleinu.
Amen.
All right, Chevra, you've made it to the end of morning services. Kol hakavod, ishkoyach. Everyone, ishkoyach. Gmar tov. Tov. What's going to happen now? We're supposed to start our next study sessions at 2 o'clock, but with permissions, because 1:45 right now, I'm thinking making a decision of 2:15. What do you think? 2:10? 2:05?
No.
Do it 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
Okay, Rabbi Jane decided. We're doing it 2 o'clock. So if you'd like to start a session at 2 o'clock, we're going to hustle you out of here. And they go where for the 2 o'clock sessions?
The chapel.
Go to the chapel. So from 2 to 4, there'll be sessions starting at 2 straight. Okay,
Yes,
we're doing Yizkor.
about approximately every 25 minutes with a 5-minute break.
Got it. Okay, perfect. That's those breaks in between. You fit. So that'll start there. Also, there's a church here at Beth Meyer for those who like to offer prayers before the orphan ark right now. So we're going to invite everyone at the end of the service, next few minutes, to make their way out of the sanctuary. But if you'd like to line up here, the ark will be open, and we'll let people come up as individuals or as families, as how you'd like to come up, and take a few moments from the open ark traditions to offer own prayers from your heart, just quietly, before God, what is in your heart, which you need to offer, that opportunity as well. The sessions go from 2 to 4. Okay. At 4 o'clock is the Wisdom Circle on Zoom that Rabbi
Yes.
Jenny's leading.
Yes, so it will be only on Zoom, and you can either experience that in your home, or you can experience that if you're sticking around for the classes. You can go into the Beit Am where there's a screen, and of course we'll be wearing masks indoors, but we'll watch the same program there. And it's a really, really special group of people who have gathered together to share with us some of their own personal wisdom from this last year, and I hope you'll be able to join us.
Awesome. Remember, those that are coming back, 6:15 is Mincha through Ne'ilah. We're doing this Havdalah at the very, very end. We'll do it outside in the tent, God willing, with kids here as well. I want to thank so much Grace again for gracing us with their beautiful and very powerful and provocative words. Yasher koach to everyone. So this time, we're going to close our service, and we invite those with the lineup for special prayers. Please make your way down here to the beam. Everyone else, quietly as you can, make yourself out to the chapel, the Bisatiski building, or to schmooze outside in the plaza. Ya, 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 ya.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uborech osher oseh shalom uboreh et hakol Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uborech osher oseh shalom uboreh et hakol Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam Hineni, here I am. Hineni, here I am.